I'm Margaret Ann Windsor. That's my real name. And I have to use the name Peggy Ann Dempsey. I married Childers. I'm not going to place my information, my photos out this morning. I want to refer to I was kidnapped in 1941, born in 39. My father's King Edward VIII, who never married Wallace Simpson, a double married Wallace and a plot to remove my father by the Illuminati, the global government, which is Rockefellers, Rothschilds, definitely the Bilderbergers, well, definitely all of them, and my Uncle George VI, illegal, and Elizabeth has kept up the lie and the crime. She is not the legal monarch. She's a traitor and should be tried as such. Now I want to go back. JFK helped in my kidnapping. He flew into London. His father, Joseph Kennedy, was made ambassador to England by President Roosevelt, FDR. His wife, Eleanor, was very much involved in all this with Wallace Simpson, and I show a photograph in most of this, or a lot of it, where she's shaking hands in the fall, I believe, well, it was, with Mrs. Roosevelt, like congratulating each other on the takedown of my father in my kidnapping in the spring of 1941. And this may not go up, I don't know. Really, the reason I'm making this, I'm going to skip around here, but because I put up photographs and all this. I was going to put it on Facebook and type it this morning, but having trouble with my, I don't know, phone. I just can't, doesn't work for me this morning. So what I wanted to respond to here, and maybe I'm skipping around, but it's this has been a record for me, a diary of such, over the years since 2012 when I went on Facebook. So I didn't just start putting all this up yesterday. I had two accounts. I have two YouTube accounts, quite frankly, because someone who I thought was a friend on Easter, the Saturday before Easter 2 years ago, I believe it was now, she got my phone. She brought me a lily, handed it to me, and I thought she was a friend. Although I began to doubt her, okay? And this is not going to go up. You better believe it. Anyway, I'm going to tell you her name because it's very important in it. And they got wealthy. They had a home furnished to them, bought. I don't know, they may have a mortgage, but it was made ready for them. A beautiful home, fireplace, in a wooded lot across from, well, about 3 blocks maybe down from the trail, the old trail where you go up Mountain Pass that I went so many times in the ice and snow and tried to camp and froze and begged to Full Heart Knob shelter, a hiker shelter, where I could at least get in some kind of shelter out of the cold and freezing. And I did it in the summer. So she's placed there. I don't know how long she'd been there before I met her, but I thought she was a friend. They still had a house, and I'm getting away from what I was going to say here, given background. They had a house that was still unsold after so they'd been over there about 3 years then. So this is about 5 years ago. That 2 years ago that she tried to, well, she did take down my Facebook's account. They weren't taken down, but I couldn't get to them because the passwords and things were changed. So now then, and her son was in computer at Liberty University. So I'm not going to go any further there with this. I wanted to zero in on this other. She took my phone, and I had Instagram, and I suppose I can if I ever have the time and a phone I can try to get it back, I hope. I have tried and wasn't able to. Anyway, I wanted to get to this. Her name is very important. I didn't know the day that I met her two years ago, a little over, that her last name, she just told me her name was Angela. Later, I went to this home, which was reminiscent a bit to the one that I had in Marietta, Georgia, Westgate subdivision. The only home I had that was pretty. The rest of my life growing up, when I was kidnapped, I was put in a dump, pigsty, horrible. Anyway, I was invited to her home just down from the trail where I had spent so many years crawling to get up, just to have a place to be, to the mountains, to be off the side of the road. Her name, it turns out, I found out later, was Angela Queen. How ironic, right? And as far as I know, this is their name. So they were moved here from North Carolina, where they still owed or had their home up for sale. So this was all, they didn't have the money. This was made way because of the patterns done in murders that I've spoken about, the mind control murders. Now then, later I found out that she has two children. One son's at Liberty University, and she has a daughter that lives in, I believe she's married and lives back in North Carolina. But she has two adopted children, and I still have their names, but I don't have their first names. One was, it would fit so much in all this. I don't know if it was Amber. I can't remember right now, but I'll just put this part, it's enough, because both of their names fit into the patterns that were used over and over in the years. So their names were, and they were biological sisters, that this Angela Coyne and her husband adopted. Okay, their last names were Castle, Castle, Queen. They were adopted, and their last name was Queen. So, this in itself is enough. I don't think people have ever doubted anything I've said about it. I do want to get this part up, though. Last night, I was listening to Coast to Coast. Richard, I believe you spell his name, Syrett. He's from Toronto, Canada, and he's a guest host, and he's very thorough. I have to give him credit. This man should be on there all the time, and I also like one of the others, like George Knapp, that co-hosts. But this Richard Syrett is unbelievable in what he's so thorough. Anyway, let me just say this. He had a guest on there he published his book, I believe, after 2014, so some things are left out, but this is what I've been telling about, and I'm only the mind control murders. And the thing that scares people, and they haven't mentioned this that I know of in the books, about the mind control murders involve hypnosis, mind control, programming, without your knowledge, putting chips in your root canal, heart bypasses, etc., without your knowledge. Go to your... Now I'll have the dentists after me. It's not enough to have the doctors and etc. that I wrote about. By the way, part of this involved Piedmont Hospital, Dr. Hardiman, Gene Strokerman, that was murdered Christmas Eve of 76, I believe, give or take a year. My attorney gave me the depositions because the police, he was her attorney and my attorney, and the police came in, and he's a former district attorney, Gene Kaiser, very good man. They took his files, which were illegal, and left him with just the deposition for Gene Strokerman, which he handed to me, copied and handed to me. Now, the person, I'm giving this background, because if you don't get the background, you don't know where I'm going or coming from. Dr. Jonas, like as in Jonah and the whale, that do you believe, or a whale of a tale? Well, everything I've said is true, and you can't imagine the things that have happened that I haven't told, and I hope are spread all over for everybody to see the truth once, and stop putting up, as they are still today, a picture of my beautiful father, Edward VIII, and stating that he is Wallace Simpson and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, which was a total lie, and it just does not sit well. I pray that my father and mother's names are cleared. Claudia Ruth O'Keefe, Queen of England, me, born in 39 and kidnapped in 41, Queen of England, at that time when I was born, because of the addendum that was written. And it was all legal. It was a fake, false takedown of my father by the Illuminati. Now I wanted to get back to why I'm doing this, if I can. I've told about Jonas Robicher, who was head of psychiatry and law at Emory University. That's where later President he was Governor Jimmy Carter became head of law, I believe, there at Emory. But this has the off of me investigating and putting up. By the way, Robicher was a good man. The Power of Psychiatry was one of the last books, if not the last one, that was published. And he usually had his books because we were this was a great man, and honest, and he paid a price for it. Anyway, it was Power of Psychiatry, and in the last chapter he mentioned 10 of my cases in my book that was never published because they almost killed me. But I also did research that led me to the Center for Disease Control there in Atlanta, which is part of Emory, if I'm remembering correctly, and where they get grants, and they farm it out, for a better word, to universities to research. Okay, you can create an illness this way, or you can create it through mind control, which goes back to the Tesla files that were stolen in 30. You can create an illness with mind control, or you can cure an illness. So this is jumping further. I mean, they can make it look like natural causes like suicide, and that's the reason Warren and Rosina Matthews, Piedmont Hospital, forensic psychologist, psychiatry, were murdered, both of them, in Terrell Mill, where I was almost killed, and Victor Gonzalez was a part of that. Anyway, they were murdered there, and it was prosecuted, and mind control was brought into play there, that one of the people on trial, the female, was programmed, hypnotized. Then it was redone, and their names have even been changed in Cobb County. Now, I knew Buddy Darden. He ran against me in a campaign in 1983 when I was flown to Larry Flynt's. And Larry Flint had been shot by a program shooter in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Now, I like Buddy Darden. I think he's an excellent, honest man. And I think Tom Sharon was it. And I met Tom Sharon and talked with him, and he said a great deal to me, and I think he's a good man. But somewhere along the line, names have been changed, etc. So, since I'm putting this up really as just a record, I'm going to bounce around. It's a little hard to keep your train of thought when you've been through a life of hell, and I don't know where my sons are, Mark and Scott, who are the most dear to me than anything in this whole world could be. So I want to go back to get my train of thought back. I listened to this program last night, and I want to zero in on one thing. He mentioned Sirhan and shooting Robert Kennedy and Oswald being programmed. In fact, he mentions a whole bunch of the murders that I told about that were programmed, shooting way back. Trouble is, I didn't know that John Kennedy had helped in my kidnapping, and Robert Kennedy, of course, became a part of it. And I didn't know it back then, the reason. I found out later, in late 83, about my kidnapping and about the Illuminati, the Roosevelts, Rockefellers, Sir Winston Churchill. These people are made out to be the ultimate in society, the great humanitarians, when they're a bunch of friggin' thugs and killers and war criminals and traitors, every ugly, vile crime in the book associated with them. And people have let it happen. So now then, I want to go back where? I want to go back to I'd done the book, MD, A License to Kill, lived at Moonraker Treetop. I started the book, apartments in Marietta, moved up, worked for doctors, found out that you could put chips in heart bypasses and you make puppets out of people. You can control, root canals, etc., control their decision making if it's head of a corporation, or you can cause deaths to appear of natural cause. And here I'm back to the Tesla files, stolen in 1930. So I got into where they were farming out the CDC, Center for Disease Control, to have they would get government grants and put it with university labs and have them come up with, I'll just make it short. AIDS was started that way and spread to Africa. Africa was British and among other, France, etc. Whole point in taking down everything British was you get everything Africa. It's global control. My father wouldn't go along with it, so they got rid of King Edward VIII. Got rid of his daughter and his wife. Anyway, where am I? So AIDS, and then the Ebola. And then there's a question about the last one that's, but they created these mass illnesses. Then your drug and your pharmacists get wealthy off of it, and it's part of the plot of the global government, which is now the United Nations out of New York, headquartered. So now, let's see. All these illnesses were spread back then. I was writing about, at the time, I also included the AIDS in the Center for Disease Control. Now, let me bounce back to, I had a letter from the FBI, June the 23rd, my dad's birthday, only this is in 79. Ongoing investigation, national security involved. The letter was issued by the FBI to district judge, federal district judge, attorney, not judge, federal, I don't think now, I've forgotten, William Harper. A very nice man. And James L. Baker was the assistant U.S. attorney. Now, April Fool's Day of 80, I had horrible things put in me that I should have died. And you talk about a living hell, it's always been. But this was, and this is going off before I can see, so I'm just going to jump here. The gentleman last night, if I can get it up, the host asked the guest, why was Mark David Chapman chosen? I'm going to say it here short and sweet. This is not sweet. Excuse me. It's horrifying to me. And I'm very tired. The reason, this man came up with some other reasons. He did not come up with this. No one has, because they'd have to tell about me and my kidnapping. John Lennon is British. He was shot by Mark David Chapman. Mark David Chapman shot him, and Lennon was put, I believe, in a car or a cab en route to Roosevelt, who helped in my kidnapping, hospital. He was shot at the Dakotas, and Mark David Chapman is my son's name, whose heirs after me, Mark. David's my father's name, and Chapman is